The Princess of the Chalet School, Chapter 17. Signor Tarniki Meets the Head. After the storm, lessons were allowed to languish for the rest of the week. The girls were all exhausted, mentally and physically, by what had occurred, so the head was merciful and spared them much work. On the morning after it was all over, no one got up much before 10 o'clock, and by the time Fraustruck and prayers were done, it was close to 11:30. They had 2 short lessons, finishing at the usual time, and in the afternoon they all packed into the train and went down the Sparts, where they wandered about the streets, then went into the public gardens, where the one fountain, the Troll, has fountains in all its towns and cities, and they are generally kept playing all the time. Occupied the attention of the people who had brought their sketchbooks and cameras, and then went on to the little museum. They had café with Herr Ansral, whom they met in the chief street, and who insisted that they should go. His housekeeper nearly had a fit when she saw him marching in with nearly 50 girls in his wake. But she was a resourceful person and had experience of him, so she sent Martha, the little maid, flying out to the conditorry to buy up all the cakes she could, and produced sweet bread and glorious coffee, while the girls admired the old master's treasures, and chattered with him as eagerly as if he were not one of the most dreaded teachers in the school. He enjoyed it all, and ate a huge meal himself, beaming on his guests like an amiable old giant, and telling the most delightful tales about trolls and other fairy people to the juniors, who swarmed all over him and considered him the dearest old man they had ever met. They returned to the valley by the last train and walked home from Seespitz, for the lake waters were still so rough that Miss Bettany thought it wiser not to take the steamer. The next day, lessons were finished at 11, and they all packed up and went off for the rest of the day to the Scholastica end of the lake. It was late when they got back, but the next day was Saturday, and they were able to rest. Games were, of course, at an end, but as it was only a fortnight to the end of term, that did not matter so much. The girls picnicked all day. They had Fraustruck up in the pine woods, and then climbed up to the Barenwald Alp, where they had sandwiches, coffee, and wild strawberries, which they had gathered on the way, together with whipped cream, which the people at the little Gasthaus supply at a cost of about 3 pence a saucer. After Mette Jensen, they roamed about on the Alp, and were agreeably surprised when Marie and Egan appeared with baskets containing buttered rolls, sent by Frau Pfaffen, and milk. Sunday was spent as usual, and on Monday they started the term end exams. "I feel awfully fresh," remarked Joey, as she took her seat in the big schoolroom. "It wasn't a bad week after all. I think it's a good idea to have a holiday like that just before we are examined. You can think so much more clearly after it." "Is that a hint?" laughed Miss Durant, who had come into the room in time to overhear this. "Well, we shall see by your papers whether it really is so." Then she called for silence and began giving out the question papers. Miss Bettany, having nothing to do at first, strolled out to the lake, accompanied by Mademoiselle. School life for her was nearly over, and she had already got things as nearly into order as she could. There was little said between the two mistresses at first as they walked slowly along in the direction of Seespitz. At length Mademoiselle spoke. "We shall miss you next term, chérie. It will not be the same at all when you are up on the Sonnalp, and we are here in the valley." Madge looked sober. "I hate giving up the school," she said. "I sometimes wish Jem had built his sanitarium here. but the air is not nearly so good as it is up there, and he has to think of that. It's done Mr. Denny a world of good, you know, and as soon as he has come down here, he is ill all over again." A quick footstep behind them broke across her speech, and then a tall man dressed in Trolley's costume, with its green jagger coat and breeches, and little hat with cock's feathers at the back, was speaking to them. "Pardon, gracious ladies, but I have not the honor to address Fräulein Bettany?" "Yes," replied Madge, looking startled. He bowed, sweeping off his hat with the gesture he had employed to the little girls when he had met them on the mountainside. Only now he was careful not to permit any mockery to show in his manner. "I am Maurice Ternecki, officer in the army of His Gracious Majesty King Rudolfo of Belsornia." Madge's face cleared. "Ah, then you are the bodyguard sent by the king to watch over the little Princess Elisaveta. I am glad you are here." "I thank you, madame," he replied. "It is an honor to be chosen to guard our little lady, and to do a Belsornian's humble best to save her from the plottings of His Highness Prince Cosimo." "Do you think, then, that she is in danger from the prince?" asked Madge, looking troubled. He shrugged his shoulders. "Ah, madame, who can say? Cosimo is a danger to her little highness as long as the crown prince is alive. It is for that reason that His Majesty has graciously sent me to assist you in your task of guarding her. I must introduce you to my colleague and successor, Mademoiselle La Patrie," said the young head. "Will you come with me?" They walked on, overtaking Mademoiselle, who had not paused when Ternecki had spoken, and he was presented to the Frenchwoman. She looked at him shrewdly. "You say you are from His Majesty, monsieur. May we not see your credentials?" He bowed again, and drawing from his pocket a parchment, offered it to them. Here is the written order of the king, sealed with his own seal and signed by himself." They took it and opened it. It was an official affair, purporting to come from the king, introducing Signor Maurice Ternecki, lately captain in the Royal Household Guards, as the bodyguard asked by La Signora Bettany on behalf of Her Royal Highness the Princess Elisaveta Margherita of Belsornia. It begged La Signora to have every confidence in Signor Ternecki, and was signed with His Majesty's characteristic signature, Ridolfo R.B. They read it, and then Mademoiselle rolled it up again and put it into the bag she was carrying. "I thank you, signor," she said. "And Her Highness?" he questioned. "Her Royal Highness is at present in the schoolroom, undergoing an examination in mathematics," replied Madge. "Then she is safe. It may be that there will be need to take her into hiding for a day or so," he said. "If Prince Cosimo should learn where she is, he would, I fear, make a determined effort to kidnap her. She would prove an admirable hostage to him, for with her in his hands he could make what terms he wished with His Majesty, and Cosimo is not good." They looked at each other in silence. What Signor Ternecki meant by it they were not sure, but something very wrong, it was clear. Miss Bettany spoke at last. "We are very glad that you are here." "That being the case," she said. Ternecki smiled, then he held out his hand in farewell. She placed hers in it, expecting a shake. To her dismay, he raised it to his lips. Madge Bettany had not spent some years abroad without learning that it was an ordinary custom, but though she was used to it when some of the fathers of her pupils, she had never felt annoyed by it. Now she would have given worlds to rub her hand where his lips had touched it. She couldn't quite do that, but she drew it sharply away. As for Mademoiselle, she gave him no chance of treating her thus, for she merely bowed to him very freezingly. He left them after that, going on to Seaspitz, where Prince Cosimo was waiting for him, if he had been able to establish himself with the head of the school, while they turned back towards the school. The first thing Madge did when he had gone was to get out her handkerchief and scrub her hand fiercely. "I also should feel like that," observed Mademoiselle as she watched her. "What do you think of our bodyguard, Marguerite?" "I dislike him," said Madge shortly. "And for me, I distrust him." "Elise, what do you mean?" "He looks at one too boldly. It is well to meet the eyes of all, but not in that way. It is as if one who bluffs, as Evandine would say." Madge stopped short in the path and faced her with troubled eyes. "Elise, do you mean that you do not think he is sent by the king?" Mademoiselle shook her head. "I do not question that, mon chéri, but it is quite possible that he is not what the king thinks him. And yet, why should I say that?" Madge took a step backwards in her dismay. "Mademoiselle, that would be simply awful. If anything should happen that Cosimo should find out where Elisaveta is, it may be necessary to trust him with a great deal, and I must have someone I can trust thoroughly." "I had better wire them at court today." "Indeed, you can do nothing of the kind," returned Mademoiselle promptly. "That would be to tell the whole continent where she is. No, you must write, and if they say it is well, then you must trust him. That is all." "Well, that's a ghastly proposition, and I'm beginning to wish I had never taken her. Oh, what a term this has been! In fact, what a year it has been! Measles last term, matron, a thunderbolt, and a fire this. And now all this on top of it all. There's only one thing to be thankful for." "And what is that?" asked Mademoiselle. "It's been the first term since we started that Jo hasn't managed to do something to herself. I suppose I'd better be thankful for small mercies and rejoice that she's got through safely and without bringing my heart into my mouth over something." By this time they had reached the gate of the school, so they went in, and there were met by an awful tale of how Joey Bettany had upset her desk, turning the ink over a new gem tunic. "And both inkwells were full," wailed Miss Durant, who had come to tell the head what had occurred. "Geography is next, you know, and they want red ink for their maps. You never saw such a sight in your lives. She's blue where she isn't red, and her tunic is ruined." "But what on earth was she doing that for?" demanded her sister. "She says the desk wasn't set up right, she thinks," replied the mistress. "It seemed all right to me, anyhow. She's changing at this present moment, and Marie has taken her tunic to the kitchen to see what can be done." Madge turned to Mademoiselle with a resigned look. "Did I say Joey had got through the term all right?" she said. "I spoke too soon. I do wonder what she will contrive to do next." Chapter 18. Elisaveta in danger and Joey as a detective. "Joey! Joey, wake up! I want you." Joey Bettany moved uneasily and grunted. Elisaveta, who was standing beside her, bent over her and shook her vigorously. "Joey, wake up! I want you." This was more successful. With a deep sigh, Joey opened her eyes, and then sat up so suddenly that she nearly banged her head against Elisaveta's chin. "Oh!" said the young lady involuntarily as she started back. "Sorry." Jo rubbed her eyes vigorously and was wide awake at last. "What under the stars do you want?" she demanded, speaking in her normal tones. Elisaveta hushed her at once. "Be quiet. You'll wake Bianca if you yell like that, and she mustn't know." "Well, but what's up?" asked Jo, lowering her tone. "Are you sick or anything?" "No, if I was, I shouldn't be standing here," declared the princess. "When I'm sick, I'm sick." "Then why on earth have you wakened me at this time of night?" protested Joe, who had been in the thick of a most thrilling dream and resented having it spoiled. Elisaveta bent forward. "'Cause there's someone standing outside down there, and I think it's that Tarniki man. Coo! What can he want now?" Joe's dream was forgotten, and she reached her hand out for her dressing gown. "Where are you going?" asked Elisaveta. "To see if it's him, of course," was the cheerful and ungrammatical reply. "Supposing it isn't? Then I shall ask why they are trespassing. People have no right in our field at 2 o'clock in the morning, or any other time, as far as that goes, unless they are asked." Joe was into her dressing gown by this time, and the two stole quietly to the wide open window and looked out. There was no one to be seen, and no sounds came up to them either. Joey turned a disgusted look on her companion. "You silly, there's not a soul there." "But there was," declared Elisaveta. "You've dreamt it." "I didn't. I've been awake for ages, and I know I heard voices. It sounded like Belsornian, too." "Talk sense. Who on earth goes around to talk Belsornian at 2 in the morning under our window? Unless the Tarnaki person is mad and talks to himself." "You can say what you like," persisted Elisaveta. "There was someone there, and I'm going out onto the balcony to see if I can see who it is." She climbed on to the window-sill as she spoke, and swung herself out onto the little balcony. Joey followed her as a matter of course, and the two peered into the grayness of the morning in July. They could see no one at first, and then a figure loomed up, dark against the shadows. And Marus Tarniki came slowly towards the house. Elisaveta seized Joey's arm in a bruising grip. "It is him! What can he want?" "Ask him and see," returned Joey practically. "Perhaps he's brought a message from your father." Elisaveta hung over the balcony rail and whistled a low, fluttering note. Joey did not know, but it was the call Belsornian cowherds use when they want to call each other. It carries a long way, even whistled as softly as she did it, and the man below heard it at once and looked up. He saw the two little figures on the balcony at once and came nearer. "It is I, Tarniki, Highness," he called in low tones. "I see it is," replied the princess. "What do you want?" "A word with you, Highness. Can you come down?" "Not now," declared Joey for the princess. "The place is all locked up, and we couldn't get out without someone hearing us." He looked up with a slight scowl. He had recognized the child who had stared so at him, and he was not anxious to meet her again. However, it was imperative that he should speak to the princess as soon as possible. He had been prospecting round, trying to find out by guess which was her window, and Prince Cosimo was within earshot, so he must make the best of things. "If the balcony will bear my weight, Highness, I should climb up." "I should think it's strong enough for that," decided Her Highness. "You can try anyway." "It would be better if we came down," said Joey. "You could catch us as we fell, and then, if we could stand on your shoulders, we could climb back. I think we'd better do that." "What I have to say is for Her Royal Highness alone," said Tarniki firmly. "Well, I needn't listen," replied Joe with equal fairness. "If you want to speak to Elisaveta, you've got to put up with me coming too. I promised to keep an eye on her, and I'm going to." Tarniki swore under his breath. He was very anxious to get the princess by herself, and he distrusted this black-eyed child with the firm little chin with all his heart. It struck him that she was too clever, and he would have given anything to have got her out of his way somehow. However, he saw that there was no help for it, and so he gave in, and the two retired to get into something more suitable for the interview than pajamas and dressing gown. Prince Cosimo joined him when they had disappeared. "Aren't they coming?" he growled. "Yes, Highness. They have gone to put some garments on, replied Tarniki. 2 minutes later the children reappeared on the balcony clad in their school frocks. Elisaveta climbed over the rail first, and Joey held her wrists. Then there was a low, "Ready?" and she dropped to the ground, Tarniki catching her neatly. Joey clambered over as soon as she was safely on the ground, and he was obliged to catch her with the same care as he had shown to the princess. He would dearly have liked to let her fall, but he didn't dare. When she was safe, he held out his hands to them. "Come, we will go a little farther away," he said. "Someone might see us here." "We can walk by ourselves, thank you," said Joey, drawing away. "Oh, and be careful of the mounds. Herr Brahm hasn't had time to get them rolled yet." He let his hands fall, realizing that they would infinitely prefer to manage by themselves, and they went a little way away from the house. "Have you brought a message from my father?" demanded the princess as he stopped. "Yes, Highness," he said. "A message and another friend." He raised his voice. "Belsarni." Prince Cosimo came towards them. He was doing a daring thing, but it was necessary that Elisaveta should think him another of her bodyguards. She had not seen him since she was 6, and she had known him as a clean-shaven young man then. Now he was much older and wore a beard, which he had grown for his present purpose. Tarniki presented him with much ceremony. "May I present Signor Carlo Belcerni to you, madame? He is to be trusted as you trust myself." The princess looked at him. The gray dawn was approaching, and she could see him fairly well. At once a dim memory teased her. Where had she seen this man before? Joey answered that in part. "Why, it's the other man," she said. "The one at the station when we were coming from the Ziltheral." Cosimo started and regarded Joey with a malignant air. It was useless to deny that he had been there, for remembrance had drawn in the princess's face, and he was afraid lest she should probe further and remember who he was. "La signora is very clever," he said to Joey, with what she called a beastly sneer expression. "I am flattered that she remembers me at all." "It was the weird way you behaved that made me remember," Joey assured him with unflattering readiness. "You bobbed about behind luggage as if you were funky of the police or something." At this point Tarniki thought it diplomatic to interfere. "We have very little time for arguments. If you, signora, will permit Signor Belcerni to walk a little way with you, I will give Her Highness His Gracious Majesty's message." Joey shook her black head. "Oh, no," she said. "I'll walk 3 steps away, and you can whisper. I'm not going anywhere with anybody." She walked the 3 steps and was thus out of earshot of the low voice. Tarniki would have enjoyed wringing her neck at that moment, but the time was going, and he had a good deal to say, so he was forced to agree. He bent down to Elisaveta and murmured, "Your Royal Highness would have been advised to come alone. There is much to say, and it is secret." "Then hurry up and say it," returned Elisaveta, standing very upright. "As for coming alone, a princess of Belsornia always has her lady-in-waiting with her." This was true, and anyway, too much time had already been wasted on things that really didn't matter. The cowherds would soon be coming along with their strings of patient cattle, leading them to the mountain pastures, and neither of the men wanted to be seen in the grounds of the Chalet school. "I beg your pardon, madame," he said gravely. "I will tell you at once. There is danger for you here. Cosimo has discovered where you are, and it is the wish of His Majesty the King and His Royal Highness the Crown Prince that you come away with me into a place of safety until the danger is past." "How do I know that you come from the king?" asked the princess. For reply he offered her a sealed envelope. "The instructions are here, madame," he said. Elisaveta took it and broke the seal. Inside was a letter written on the king's private note paper. Cosimo had a spy in the palace, and in the king's handwriting. It was very brief and simply ran, "Elisaveta, obey the bearer of this in all things. He has my fullest confidence. Ridolfo R." It was in her grandfather's peculiar script. Cosimo was gifted in the art of forgery, and she saw no reason to doubt it. "Joey," she called. Joey was beside her and remembered the note and reading the note before either of the men could prevent it. "Coo," she said, when she had finished it. "What have you to do?" "I am to go into hiding at once," replied the princess. "What, now?" Cosimo turned to his friend. "Curse this brat," he said in Russian. "Will she rouse the whole valley?" With a great effort, Joey controlled herself. She had felt that all was not well. This unguarded speech of the prince's made her determined to keep with Elisaveta whatever happened. Czernicki turned to the princess. "Not this moment, madame," he said, "but soon. It is the request of his majesty that you will speak of it to no one, lest Cosimo should make inquiries." Prince Cosimo spoke again. "Take her at once," he said in his fluent Russian. "Leave it now, and something will happen. That child knows too much." Czernicki looked doubtful, but something in his master's face convinced him that it was the only thing to do. "Will it please you to come, Highness?" he said to the princess. "Believe me, it is better so." Elisaveta looked dismayed. "I cannot come now," she said. "I am not ready." "You can get a hat and coat if I put you up," urged the man. "I will lift you and La Signora, and she can help you come down again. It is best." Then he added the one thing that was needed to persuade her. "For the good of the kingdom, Highness, it is necessary." Elisaveta turned to Joey. "I must," she said. "Come on." Joey turned and went across the grass with her without a word. She was too busy thinking to say anything. The story might be true. She had very little to go on, for she had only followed Cosimo's Russian very roughly, and she might have got it all wrong. Anyway, she would have to let Elisaveta go, but, and it was a big but, she would keep her promise and go too. Only the men would not know it. They climbed up and got back into the dormitory without any trouble. Elisaveta collected her toothbrush, her comb, and some handkerchiefs. Joey helped her into her long coat and gave her her hat. Then she put her arms round her neck. "If anything goes wrong and you're frightened, or anything," she said, "call 3 times like an owl. Don't let them know, though. Goodbye." She kissed her friend and then helped her through the window. Elisaveta dropped, and Cosimo caught her safely. Joey waved her hand and then went back into the room, rather to the surprise of the men, who had been sure that she would wait to see them off. Joey had other things to do, however, and she would have been ashamed of herself if she could not follow a track in the thick dews. She dressed herself warmly, took her purse, and also Elisaveta's, for she had no idea what she might want, and money was always a good thing to take with one on an expedition of that kind. Then she wrote a note to her sister, which she pinned on her pillow, and when they had a good start, she went out onto the balcony once more and let herself down onto the grass. The Chalet school remained in stillness, although Bianca, vaguely disturbed, turned over in bed restlessly. However, she did not wake up. By the time that Marie Paffin, always the first up, was stirring, the 2 members of the school were far enough away.